4. Figuration is connected with movement. The symbols for pictorial dimensions. I begin where all pictorial form begins, with the point that sets itself in motion. The point, as agent, moves off, and the line comes into being, the first dimension. If the line shifts to form a plane, we obtain a two-dimensional element. In the movement of planes to spaces, the clash of planes gives rise to a body, three-dimensional. Summary of the kinetic energies which move the point to a line, the line into a plane, and the plane into a spatial dimension. 1929. Huts, pen and ink drawing. 1925. The last village in the valley of Ph. Detail from 1927. About to take a trip, pen and ink drawing. 1934. Heavily fructified, pencil drawing. Graduated accentuation of the line. Lines made stronger or weaker. Productive growth of selected line with graduated accentuation. Productive growth of the point. Concentric waves. Two-dimensional structure emanating from nuclear strata. Linear accent on nerves or incarnation of the line. The linear body becomes broader in growth. Incarnation, the middle line as skeleton. The line as limit for progressive growth, flow, inner content. Incarnation represented in terms of causal reality, the constructive propagation of lines strictly adjusted to the threads of construction. The line articulated in terms of measure or time, growth, motion, divisibility. Structure classified in its essentials. 1927. Variations. Oil on canvas. Progressive stratification is characterized by the pull from outside in. In spatio-temporal terms, the density and extension of the progressive motif indicate the road traveled by the sum of the endotopic and exotopic accents. Variation of accent, which may be progressive inward, progressive outward, limiting, or spatial. Corporeo-spatial tensions. Dynamic density. Dynamic density. Discharge of tension from within or additive, harmonized progression of a dimension of motion. Enrichment by spatial emphasis. The tension spreads in two directions. Motion, regular or irregular, progressive. Result, diagram of dynamic density in two directions. Inwardly progressive, marching in the directions up, down, and left, right. Harmonized progression of two dimensions, simultaneous outward and inward pull. Thing or body, active, locality or space, passive. Tensions between bodies and space. Progression always has spatial effects. The rule in progression is movements of extension and contraction of tone value accompanied by measurable movement of area, enlargement, and diminution. Corporeo-spatial tensions. Diagram of the dynamic formation of the circle. The radius grows from the inside out in pure progression. Another diagram of the dynamic formation of the circle by radiation. Radiation comes from the center and is related to the innermost point. Illustrations. Variant on toward the innermost. Inner dynamic density. Variation of rotation, extension into space. Diagram of the dynamic formation of the triangle in a variation with rotary movement. Detail from 1928, overtones, pen and ink drawing. Progressively spatial. Progressively pushing from the center to the limits. Outside and inside in corporeo-spatial combination, progressively inward and medial. Stratification is defined by the relation that outer bears to inner. Inside and outside as concepts are either relative or limiting. Horn perceived intent, pen and ink. The basic forms, their tensions and inner relations. The basic forms from the point of view of their causal determinants. In this representation, which is necessarily based on a consideration of the inner essence, the circle is the encompassing, the universe, the cosmos. The square is an exception based on the horizontal vertical. The triangle is closer to the circle, a part of it, and the diagonal relates the two. From here, there might well be a bridge to a theory of style. The tensions underlying the basic forms considered, according to their inner coherence, inside and out. How did it come about? What is the cause? The universal cause is reciprocal tension, a pull in two directions at once. Discharge of tension from outside, or subtractive. Discharge of tension from within, or additive. A straining from all sides, exertion. The tension discharged, accomplished. Centripetal inward pull. Basic movement of domination. The center as point of culmination. The intensified inner relations are directed towards the center. Movements starting from one's own being can be enhanced by suggestions of counter-movement, synthesis of movement and counter-movement. Centrifugal, outward pull. The articulating energies and impulses illustrated by the example of a leaf, growth in several directions, union of material tension and ideal tension, i.e., simultaneous presentation of essence and appearance. Adjustment between progressive forms of motion, combination of rigid and free rhythms. coming and going represented by increase and decrease. Each dimension grows in relation to the other, two-dimensional relation of growth. A change in the direction of parallel rays may be considered as a repeated reflection of the centers, shifting centers, or, in the case of elementary forms, as a compromise, interlock. Compromise between straight, broken, and bent lines. The movements in the example should be defined mechanically as discharges of tension between fixed and moving points. The compromises yield series of forms whose movement is intermediate between the movements of free and strict form. The union between rigid and free rhythms produces hybrid forms. These hybrid forms may be perfectly harmonious, or they may incline towards either parent. Progressive trend towards the center. Outside diminishing. Inside increasing. The progressive multiplication at the center brings about a proportional decrease as the movement approaches the periphery, increase towards the center. Progressive interlocking of multi-dimensional growth. Constructive, impressive combination, i.e., causally real and merely real, simultaneous genetic and phenomenal representation. Exotic Bird Park, Pen and Ink, 1925. Several forms of motion, starting from a guideline in parallel. The formal extension results from shifting centers and their influence on the normal radiation. Interpenetration of endotopic and exotopic treatment of essence and appearance moving in rhythm suggests the focal movement. Compromise between free and strict form. The combination of relaxed and rigid rhythm results in hybrid forms. Rays are defined by their relation to the center, to the point. Stratification is defined by the relation of outer to inner. Stratification employed genetically, dynamic proximity. Representation according to essence, movement, growth. Synthesis of essence and appearance, interpenetration, interlacing. Boundaries of different value for inside and outside. Boundary line of the outer areas. Boundary line of the inner areas. Boundary line of the innermost areas. Example showing formation of differentiated boundaries, space and form transparent in a three-dimensional body. 3 Phantom Ships, Pen and Ink Drawing, 1928. Boundary resistance to the vertical, that is, parallel deflection. Boundary resistance, deflection through an angle. New Things on Old Soil, Color, 1931. The traditional concepts of linear perspective, foreground, middle ground, and background are replaced by determinations of position, top, bottom, left, right.